So we're going to talk about challenging situations and that sort of thing. So I want to talk first about listening. And I know that that seems like it's pretty basic as far as listening, but I will say that it's listening with more than just our eyes. So oftentimes when I'm working with students and things like that, I'm trying to get their baseline data. Like, how does this kiddo normally act? How does this student normally act? Whether they're 20 years old or 7 years old. What are normal things that they do and that their bodies do that are part of their normal baseline and how they act? And usually I do that by just asking them general questions. What do you enjoy doing? Are there places that you like to go? What sorts of things do you look at when you're looking for books or on TV or on the computer? What sorts of things? And they give me that sort of information. And the reason why I do that is because I'm looking for different behavioral things that they might do that tell me that that's their baseline. So that when they tell me additional information, and this is where it gets a little bit more intense with this stuff, is if they give me additional information and I'm noticing little body mannerisms like a shoulder movement or lips coming together and tight or fleeting eye glance or they're turning their core away from me and that sort of thing, then I'm like, that's not part of that person's baseline. They've got more going on. Their anxiety has gone up, or they're trying to tell me something else that is a mistruth. Not saying they're necessarily lying, but they may not want me to know all the information. But there's certain subtle signs that tell me that. There isn't always a definite sign that someone's not being truthful or something like that, but there is definitely those little pickups that are like, they don't normally do that. When they talk to you, normally their core is facing the other person. They're angled on and they're talking to them. So the fact that their feet have now turned away when they're talking to me tells me right off the bat, something else is going on. I got to dig into that a little bit deeper. So if I'm asking them questions about what time do you go to bed and is it hard for you to sleep and all that, and they were chit-chatty with me about the stuff they do in the evening, and then all of a sudden when we start talking about going to bed and all that, they turn away. And so in the past, I've had kids say, like, I'm like, do you sleep okay? Well, yeah, I go to sleep. And I'm like, and then what do you do? And they turn away slightly, and I'll be like, I bet you do something after you're supposed to be in bed. And they go, well, Mom's blocked me on Fortnite, so I can't play that because she thinks I'm too young. But I found if I get the iPad and I go into YouTube, I can watch kids playing Fortnite, and then I can see what they're doing with that. And I do that, and I usually do that for a couple hours. And because they got me a weighted blanket, it keeps all the light out from the iPad, so they don't know I'm doing it. So even if I hear her come into the room, I can slide the iPad under the pillow. She never knows. And they just tell me that because I seem like a very non-judgmental person. I'm super judgy, don't get me wrong. So we all are to some extent, but I seem like I'm not judgmental at all because my body language is very open. My core is always turned towards the person that I'm talking to. I have a confident stance and everything. I have a very open face, and I've practiced that because there's things that make us look closed off, and we want information. So when he starts telling me about that, I'm like, oh, you do? What sorts of things do you watch? And he gives me, all the little guys that he's watching on YouTube that play Fortnite and all that sort of information. So, and then I turn around and tell the parent. And then he's like, man, I got blocked on YouTube. How did that happen? Well, it happens because we know you need to get to sleep. And your parents can't figure out why you're not sleeping well at night. So, and they give that information. Because I am a non-judgmental bystander that they feel like, oh, this person's interested in me. They want this information towards me. They want to know what's going on. So there's some really important things that I do that help me be able to do that. One of them is mirroring, also called the gauchos reaction. So when you're mirroring, you're actually modeling the other person's body language. Okay, and you're not mimicking it because, if you mimic it, then they know usually off the bat and they're like, oh, yeah, you're just making fun of me sort of thing. But you're actually mirroring what they're doing. So, and I do this with students all the time because oftentimes I'm brought in and the kids are already having some sort of challenge and they're like, oh, now this new person's staring at me. So I have to build rapport really quickly and value so that student wants me around so that I can then help support the situation. So I do some things that really help to do that. And one is I do some emulation with their body language. So if they're sitting in a chair and they're talking to me and they're kind of leaning to the side, I'll turn my core towards them, but I'll have almost the same stance. I'll have it mirrored when I'm doing that. So if they're talking to me, because I want to look like I'm paying attention, I tilt the top of my head slightly and I lift the chin slightly because it looks like I'm listening. And I am, but I'm listening with more than my ears. I'm actually listening more with my eyes. Are they regulated? Is this person really anxious? Are they in their head, or are they actually speaking to me about things that are going on? What's going on with them? And then I'll nod and give them the paralanguage and all that with it. And then the killer, if they're doing something and I'm like, yeah, that's it. Then I give them the, yeah, that triple nod, that 1, 2, 3. And that says they just keep going. Then they're like, yeah, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And they give me the keys to the kingdom as far as the information that we're looking for. But those sorts of things oftentimes mean the difference between us assuming why something has occurred and why behavior has happened, instead of actually finding out from their perspective why these things occurred. And that's more important. Like, people will say, do you do a functional behavior assessment? And I'll say, no, I do another process. It's called an ALSUP. And the reason why is because I don't want to assume things that are going on with the individual. I don't want to assume I know why a behavior is happening. I want to make sure that I actually know why a behavior is happening. So angling, fronting, we talked about that. Right amount of eye contact. You ever talk to someone and you're like, wow, you have crazy eye contact and it's making me uncomfortable? Yeah, and they're like, yes, you. You're doing it, Bethany. So having enough eye contact, but not too much, and knowing what is the typical amount of eye contact that the individual that you're communicating with has. What is their amount of eye contact? Do you know how many times babies blink in a minute? I think this is an interesting fact. Babies blink usually 2 times in a minute. Isn't that crazy? Do you know how many times adults usually blink in a minute? It's like 14 to 60, depending on medical, diet, hydration, all sorts of other things. So knowing that, and what is that? Because oftentimes when people start to get uncomfortable, it's like when I teach breathing exercise and I'm like, we're gonna do a breathing exercise. And then all of a sudden people are like, I'm gonna hyperventilate! You're talking about breathing. So knowing what is the amount of eye contact that person usually gives. Because whatever is not their typical is gonna tell you something's off. I need to dig deeper. I need to get more information because there's something going on. And whether or not it's just the person's uncomfortable about something, whether they're trying to hide something, whether they're saying, this is not okay, but I don't know how to tell you, and they may not even know it's not okay, that gives you all that information about that. We talked about the triple nod. I do it subconsciously sometimes with people, and I'll notice it, especially if I'm teaching on Zoom. Like, all of a sudden someone will touch the nose, I touch my nose, and then I'm like, stop it. So labeling is our verbal process when we're labeling what's going on with the person. So we're phrasing things as open-ended questions. And I do this constantly with people. So my husband always calls me the interrogator because I ask so many questions. So I ask lots of questions. What happened when that occurred? Who was there? When did it happen? When does it normally happen? What do you think about that as far as it happening? The question I don't ask, though, typically, not at the beginning, is why. What does why typically elicit from people? Judgment. It absolutely does. It elicits judgment. It also elicits a solution, right? If you ask why, then it's like, why did you do that? Well, if I knew, then I would have done something different. If somebody's asking us why, if we had the answers to that, then we would have been able to solve the situation before, right? And the same thing, when we're talking with anybody, when we say why, I usually save why until I see the light bulb go off. You see the eyebrows like that. And you're like, oh, they've got it. They've got an idea, and they think they know what occurred. Then I'll say, why do you think that happened? And then if we come up with a plan, because we want them participating, and the plan doesn't work, the why isn't right. We don't have the right why. We got to go back and ask more questions to get to a better why. So we want to use why, just not early on. We need more info. Watching pitch and tone, because even more so than body language, changes in pitch and tone tell you when things are off, right? You ever talk to someone or you call someone and you're like, ooh, their voice just doesn't sound right. That's why text communication and email is so tough, because you can pick up their tone, what's going on with them a lot of the time, can't you? the changes in tone and things like that, keeping in mind that our tone as we age changes and our pitch changes. But we can pick up on those things. Ooh, that person has lower energy today than they had a few days ago. What's up with that? What's going on there? Is there something, going on with them? Are they just tired? What's going on? So watching that pitch and tone and matching it to the baseline. Does it match their baseline? Or is it very different? Is their speech more rapid? Is it slowed considerably down? We need to dig into that a little bit more. So just because someone has a slow cadence of speech when they normally have a fast one doesn't mean necessarily that they're hiding something. It could mean that they're processing at the same time. Could mean they're super tired that day. Could mean they haven't eaten. Lots of things, but we need to gather more information. Same thing if their speech is much faster than it normally is, or if there's changes in their pitch and their tone and everything else. Got to check into it more. But those are all part of knowing what their baseline is and going back to that. And I always say know their name. Like, I try very hard to learn names really quickly. I work in a lot of schools, and it's really important for me to know their names, because as soon as I do, if I come back and I see a kid again, if I speak to them by name, then they're like, she likes me, she remembers me. Like, I do, you're my favorite.